Committee for the Carson City School District. Renee assures me that even though the clock on the back says it's not yet 7 o'clock, our phones say 7:01, so we're beginning. We'll begin with the flag salute by Trustee Don Carini.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And to begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to have a moment of silence so that we can send all positive thoughts that we can to the students from Carson High School and the student from Dayton who were injured in the accident last Thursday night. So we'll go ahead and begin that now. Thank you. And I know it's been a sobering event for our community, and I just want the families and the students to know how much they are loved and how much our thoughts and prayers are with them, and how grateful we are for the community that is supporting them, and for all of our staff members who are also supporting them. I know that really hits home for everyone, and everyone is feeling that they're all our kids. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item 2, adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Trustee Swerzik, seconded by Trustee Casiopo. Did I catch him right? Okay. Do we have any further discussion? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And we'll move on to agenda item 3, superintendent's report. For information only, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Crossman, members of the board. We have some special guests with us this evening from Nevada Energy. I'd like to introduce Mary Simmons, who's the Vice President of Business Development and Community Strategy.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here this evening. We have great news for you. We're here to present a check that represents some great savings for the district. It's always a pleasure to work with Superintendent Stokes and his team of people, particularly Mark Cornick, who couldn't be here this evening, the Director of Operations, Mark Johnson, who's part of his staff as well. And I'm pleased to report this evening that they were responsible for implementing a project to save energy at 16 different schools. They will save a total of 1.8, almost 1.9 million kilowatt hours per year. That's equivalent to about more than 200 homes used in an entire year. So it's pretty impressive. And this is not the first project they've done. For those of you who've seen us here before, it's because on a regular basis, this team of people does so many different projects to save energy. Very impressive staff. I think you probably know this, but Mark Cornick was also recognized with the Golden Pinecone Award for his leadership and sustainability last week, and it's just representative of what has really been accomplished with the Carson City School District. So earlier we did a little photo opportunity, but we are here to present a check for a little over $93,000 that NV Energy provided for this project. And we estimate that anywhere from $150,000 to $180,000 per year will be saved by the district. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Charlene Booth, who is here. She's the major account manager for the Carson City School District, as well as Annie Dumond, who helps us run these programs. So again, really just here to congratulate all of you. Thank you for participating in the project, and thank you for saving so much energy and doing it on a regular basis. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, board members? Okay, thank you very much. That's always good news.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, we do appreciate our relationship with NV Energy. They've been very kind and generous with their resources and with their advice. Next, I would like, with your permission, to turn a little time over to Mr. Fueling. I've asked him to make a report regarding a potential opportunity to refund one of our school bonds.
Good evening, trustees. So some time back, in speaking with Marty Johnson, our district's bond advisor, he's always looking for opportunities for savings in various ways for our debt service, but specifically to look for something that would allow us to move up the timetable of the future bonding that we're talking about in fiscal year 21, so basically September of 2020. And what he was able to do is find a refunding opportunity that would save the district about $800,000 a year in debt, or $800,000 total in debt service, which is significant by itself. But with the way that the payments would happen, would be laid out, there would actually be an opportunity to move that current date of September 2020 up a year to September 2019, where not that we would have to bond at that point, but it would give us the option to bond earlier, and given the growth in the area, it's a pretty valuable option, I think, at this time. So now, originally we were talking about doing this in January or February, bringing it to your attention in December and kind of thereafter, making that happen. With the recent proposed changes from the president and at the federal level in this new tax bill, there's actually a provision in there that would make our refunding bonds less enticing to investors. Basically, right now, if you are an investor and you'd purchase this bond or parts of this bond, those whatever earnings interest you make off that is tax exempt. After January 1st, it may no longer be, and therefore we would have to pay a higher interest rate to make it more enticing to investors to purchase. So what he's put together an accelerated timetable to try to get this done by December 31st so that it is still tax exempt for investors. So really, that doesn't, the only impact to us is that will be coming rather quickly. So at the next board meeting, Mr. Johnson will be here to present or help me present the bond resolution for your approval or consideration and approval. And then we would be able to close that before the end of the calendar year and avoid, it's not for sure that this is going to happen, but there is potential. And if we can avoid that and get ourselves lower payments for the long run, it seems like it would be a good deal. So there's savings. Again, it moves up the bonding timeline by a year, but it's just going to happen rather quickly. So,
Do we have any questions? Okay, thanks, AJ.
Thanks.
And Madam President, members of the board, we wanted to get that in front of you today so you'd have a little time to think about it. Certainly, if you have some questions, please give my office or AJ's office a call so that we can maybe help explain or discuss why this seems to be a good idea at this time. But we will have Mr. Johnson here at our November 28th meeting to present more information. But that's all I have for you tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stokes. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 4, board reports and board member comments for information only. We'll begin with Sienna Fletcher from Pioneer High School.
Thank you, members of the board. The students and staff of Pioneer would like to send our heartfelt prayers and thoughts to the Carson and Dayton High students, families, and friends affected by the accident last Thursday. PHS leadership is sponsoring a food drive for the Thanksgiving holiday. Please bring in non-perishable food items and drop them off in the office. There is a rock sport field trip this Friday, November 16th. Sign-up list is on Mr. Lorian's door. Remember that next week is a short week, so talk to your teachers to arrange for any makeup work. This is all to report for Pioneer High School.
Thank you, Sienna. And from Carson High School, we have Giselle Nava Rivera. Okay.
All right, so there's going to be a Carson versus Douglas teacher basketball game tomorrow at 7, and all the proceeds are going towards the families of the victims in the car accident. And then the theme is Community First and Rivalry Second. And then also Carson High School is holding a holiday craft fair on November 17th at 5 and November 18th from 9 in the morning to 4 p.m. And then tomorrow also leadership meeting after school if anybody would like to come to see what's going on elsewhere and at school. And then the Thanksgiving break is from November 22nd to the 26th. And that's all.
Thank you, Giselle. Trustee Carini. Okay. Trustee Casiopo.
Just really quick, we've said a lot about the high school already, but again, just wanted to pass along best wishes. I've been real impressed with the kids. A lot of families have gone up to the hospital. They aren't necessarily able to go in and talk to their friends for obvious reasons, but just the amount of support coming out in terms of caring, in terms of visiting, has just been overwhelming. We had a candlelight vigil the other night over on 3rd Street, and there were several hundred people that showed up, and it was shoulder to shoulder from Curry Street to 395, so much so that they had to block both streets for a while. So it just shows that, our community rallies together, and it's unfortunate we have to do it for such a tragedy right now, but we have a really close community, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being a part of this.
Trustee Walker.
So I have a few items. Fremont Elementary School is having an extended early release day on November 27th, so students will be released at 1 o'clock. They also want to remind families they have a movie night this Friday at 7. At Bordewick Bray, they've started a 5th grade leadership group, and they're really excited about the possibilities these students are going to have and opportunities in their school. They're going to participate in a number of different school leadership activities like morning announcements, monitoring the hallways, attending and helping with parent informational nights, so they're going to be ambassadors, I guess. They're going to have a Bordewick Bray Chili's night on Tuesday, November 14th on Topsy Lane. A portion of the money made from 4 to 9 o'clock is going to be given back to the school to help various school material and needs. STEM night at Bordewick Bray is scheduled for Thursday, November 16th from 5:30 to 7. Sierra Nevada Journeys will once again help engage parents and students with science, technology, engineering, and math. And it is reported that it's always an amazing night for families. Monday, November 20th is the annual turkey trot. Students are going to race around the track to win a turkey or a pie for their family. And Tuesday, November 21st, Bordewick Bray students will be making cards for American Soldiers, which is an annual event they do to thank those who are in service to our country. And one final announcement, Food for Thought, who we partner with to help our students with food insecurity, we've been having a food item of the month. And so for November, the food item of the month is mac and cheese cups. And so if you would like to donate those, you could drop them off at the Food for Thought office, which is in the shopping center behind Bullies, Monday through Friday, 9 to 1. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Walker. Trustee Swerzik.
Yes, just a comment on the candlelight visual. That was a real powerful statement of love and support from our community for the families and these students. But I think a special thanks goes to Angela Golick for putting this together. It was something special. It was a lot of work, and so I just think we ought to say thank you to Angela.
Nicely done. Trustee Wilkie.
At Mark Twain on the 29th is their first grade concert. And then I'd just like to congratulate all the winter sports. It was a great showing this year and loved how we beat up on Douglas. No offense from the rival, but it was good to see. And Abel Carter getting over 400 yards was pretty incredible. It was something to see. And then just a reminder from NASB that our conference is coming up at the end of the week. And on Friday, after the conference, there is a business meeting, and if you are interested in being legislative chair, let us know. There's a couple people in there, but Carson's always a good one for a legislative, or this is an off legislative year, so probably not as good. And then we'll have the elections for president and vice president. And we have
news with that. Any potential candidates you might know?
well, if it goes the way that it usually goes, then I will be president-elect if nobody runs against me. So we'll see how that goes. If nobody wants that job.
You can still throw your hat in, Mike.
Yeah, you can feel free to run against me, Mike. Come on in. And then our keynote speaker on Saturday is Mr. Ed Massey, who's the former president of the National School Board Association, and he's always gives a really good talk, and he's putting what NASCAR and school boards have in common. So it should be a good night, and then finishing up with the awards banquet on Saturday night with our dinner and introduction of new officers. So hopefully we'll see most of you there. And it's your last opportunity to get training under the legislative mandate. So.
And if you don't get the training, it'll be posted on our website that you did not receive the training.
Right, you'll be on the naughty list. And since I'm clerk of this board, I'll have, on December 12th, I'll have what I have for training for you guys. So if there's something missing, you can let me know before I give it to the website.
Thank you, Trustee Wilkie. Trustee Green?
I wanted to thank Mr. Stokes again for leading my my high school class during our class reunion on a tour of the high school. It feels like it was a long time ago now, but there were no meetings in between that time. So, but he did it on his own time on a holiday. And it was greatly appreciated from many members of my class and myself too. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Green. For Fritch Elementary School, they'd like to thank all the families who attended the STEM night that was held. Gosh, I can't remember when it was held, but a week or two ago. But it was a great night. They learned a lot about STEM. And also, they would like to thank all the veterans who came to the Fritch Veterans Ceremony. They always put on such a good program, and those kids are so cute when they sing. Also, they wanted to report that construction's moving along. All excavation is complete, and they are ready to look forward to the next steps and what improvements will be made. And they also want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. For Carson Middle School, they'd like to thank the PTA for a successful cookie dough fundraiser. The cookie dough has all been delivered. And as someone who's worked on that fundraiser, I'd like to thank the office staff for all their help in helping find everyone who needs to get their cookie dough picked up. Also, they'd like to issue congratulations to Ana Lucia Galindo Ledesma for being selected as the Carson City Elks Student of the Month. They are very proud of her. And boys basketball season is underway, and they'd like to remind the students that if you're staying to attend a home game, that you need to make sure that you stay in the gym and make arrangements for transportation home after the game. And also, they would like to congratulate the Carson Middle School bands under the direction of Mr. Nick Jacques for their successful participation in the Veterans Day Parade in Reno last Saturday. The Solon Pride Marching Band was the only middle school invited to the parade and was the first band in the lineup of the parade. So they're very proud of the band students for doing that. And also, they'd like to thank the 8th grade social studies students and teachers, Mr. Paulson, Mr. John Paulson, Mr. Doug Whistler, and Mrs. Kathy Dilger for the 8th grade social studies veterans placards that they put out on the front lawn every year. That has become a very nice tradition. And it's refreshing to see so many community members come and see the support that they have from the students at Carson Middle School. And one last thing, Carson Middle School has a goal for all the students to be in attendance at every day, so they're currently hosting grade level competitions to see which grade can meet the goal of 96.5% attendance each week. And also, just for your information, for the NASB conference on Thursday night before the conference begins, the Board of Directors and Executive Committee will be meeting. And Blakely Hume from the Department of Education and myself will present some of the information on district policies for English language learners from the English Mastery Council. I just wanted to let you know that they selected Carson City's district policy, EL district policy and regulation as the example of a very well done policy that will be presented there. So
Very good.
kudos to Laura Austin and our staff for putting together that and meeting all of the new criteria that has been issued for that. So that concludes my report. Do we have any other discussions or reports to be made? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 5, association reports. Nope, we don't have any association reports today, so we'll go to agenda item 6, public comment. For discussion only, do we see any public comment? And if we don't, then I won't read the whole paragraph. I'm not seeing any public comment, so we'll ask again for it on matters that are marked for possible action. We'll always ask for public comment. So agenda item 7, presentation on the Next Step program in the Carson City School District, a vocational transition program for 19 to 22-year-old adults for discussion only. Karen Bianchi and Christine Winder.
Good evening, Madam President and the board. We're glad to share this program with you. So legislation directs us in services we provide for our students 19 through their 21st birthday. So in 2014, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act was put into place. And what it does is it directs us to work with vocational rehab and the schools to provide support for our students who are going into transition and employment. So this is the program that Carson City has worked on up to this point to create those supports for our students. So Karen Bianchi and her team is going to explain what they do, and she'll be able to answer questions for you. So,
thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Karen Bianchi, like Christy said. I'm a teacher in Carson City School District. I'd like to introduce to you Carolyn Akins. Carolyn Akins is my paraprofessional that works with me. She's worked with me for a lot of years, and she's just absolutely amazing. And I'd like to introduce Grace Shaw. And Grace is our job coach. She is provided to us by Voc Rehab, who is funding her to come work with us. So Grace has also been amazing, so we're excited to have this team. You can stand up here. Yeah, I've been a school teacher in Carson City for almost 30 years, and it's been special education the entire time, and it's my heart. I love it so much, and I've been blessed to have a job that I can wake up every day and say, you know, I'm happy to go to work. And when you work somewhere for so long, you watch these kids and you watch them grow up, and some kids I have for like 5 and 6 years because special ed, they don't move along. We get to keep them, like Christy said. We have an obligation to these students if they want to stay until their 22nd birthday. So for 12 plus years, we bring them in and we love them and we nurture them and we teach them and we give them every tool that we have to help make them independent and to be successful as adults. And then the day before they turn 22, you know, we have a party and we get a pizza and we celebrate their successes and we pat them on the back and we say, go out there and show them what you have. And these are amazing kids. And we send them on their way and we hope for the best. And a lot of times they do that and they go out and they get jobs and they're successful. But there's this pocket of students that they struggle and they just need more help. They need more support. And so with what Christy was talking about, the legislation and with special ed trends, it just seemed like the right time. So I approached the director, Jan Albertson, and I talked to her about having a program that was directed or geared just toward transition and vocational program. And I guess most of you know Jan, and sorry Jan, but she has this smirky little smile sometimes. And she gave me that smile, and I'm not sure exactly what she said, but what I heard was like, go for it, Karen. And I was, yay, okay, I'm so excited. And then I thought, well, what do I do? And that's why I got that smile, because she knew there's a lot more involved than just making my little cute sign and inviting my students to my program. So with a lot of help from a lot of great people in the district and a lot of support from Jan and Christy, meeting with outside agencies, And also, I went to different districts and did observations and talked to them about how they ran their program. We came up with this new program called The Next Step. So I'm really excited. I'll read it to you, but it is a PowerPoint, so I'm going to figure out how to do this. Next Step, where STEP actually stands for Support, Transition, Employment, and Partnership. And that name was almost as hard to come up with as our program. And it took a long time to think of it, so I'm pretty proud of that too. Where did I point? Oh. Our mission is to assist young adults with disabilities obtain and maintain competitive integrated employment. So look here so you can hear me. Competitive means we want them to make minimum wage or better, and integrated means working with non-disabled peers. I'm sorry that takes so long. I don't know how to make a PowerPoint either, so. The Next Step is a program for select students ages 19 to 22, which offers an opportunity for them to work toward their post-secondary goals by providing the necessary training and experience for future competitive employment. And in order to support Nevada's strategic plan on integrated employment, we include the following goals. Goal 11, young people with intellectual or developmental delays have work experiences that are typical of their peers. And Goal 12, every individual with intellectual or developmental delays in Nevada transitions to adulthood with vocational experiences and the education that will enable them to obtain competitive integrated employment. And they're really cute kids. They love me. The Next Step supports the following: job skills training, vocational training, employment placements, transportation and travel training, recreation, leisure skills training, and social skills training. The Next Step has partnered with Voc Rehab, who has funded our job coach, Grace, who I just introduced you. Grace meets with the class. She comes in every day. She works with the students on their pre-vocational employment skills and training skills, and then she goes and meets us out at work sites where she works with the students at this work sites. Now, our whole goal here is for our students to get employment. That's the goal. And if one of them does get employment but still needs a little bit of help, Voc Rehab then steps in and will supply a job coach for up to 90 days. And if we have a student that actually is going to require more help than that, we will hook them up with Rural Regional, who then will give them a lifetime job coach if that's what they need. And we have class time as well, and we work to develop the students' transition strengths, interests, and goals, and workability skills, and we work on the following: resume writing cover letters, completing applications, online and hard copies, conducting job searches, identifying work strengths, compensating for disabilities, budgeting and saving, getting along with others, meeting job expectations, handling rejection, using public transportation, and we also work on things like anger and conflict management skills, realistic appraisal of their assets, enjoying and managing leisure time, and healthy habits. So we started last year, we started at the end, we just kind of jumped in at the very end of the year, and we started at the Ronwood Center, and they were just amazing. It was a place where the students could go and they could work and learn skills and make mistakes, and that was all fine. It was such a nurturing, loving environment. They did janitorial, they did stocking, they worked sorting food, and any job that they had, we did. We are presently at the computer core. The students are learning they are completely disassembling computers. They go in, it's just like what you would do at a job. They check in on the computer, they go check out their tools, they work, and then they take breaks. They have to come back on time, they have to check out, and it's amazing. They have to work alongside a lot of other employees there. We also go to Goodwill. There we've been just sorting and books and clothes and things like that by color coding. And they're learning customer service there. They're greeting customers. They're learning, get out of the way. It's just a lot of skills that are very beneficial to them. One of our students, not that one, that's Carolyn. She's been going to Fritch and Borderwick, working in the cafeteria. She's been doing dishes and serving food. And they love her so much that when I pull her out, they call me and they want her back, and they really would like to hire her full time. So we're working on having her fill out the application and doing that process and hopefully making the accommodations that she needs so we can hire her on a full-time basis. One of our students works at the early childhood. She works mostly with a little boy that has cerebral palsy, and I hate to take his face out because he's so adorable, but I thought I had to. But she works with him. She makes sure he's safe and balanced and makes sure he's involved in all his activities. And then she helps in another classroom where they're now serving lunch to the preschoolers. She opens their packages, and she has a targeted list of words that she uses with the kids to help them develop and expand their vocabularies. And as we go to each job and we learn and master the skill, we move on to the next place. I mean, we love working everywhere, but our intention is to show them all the different kinds of jobs. Sometimes they really have it in their mind that they want to grow up and be something, and when they get there, they hate it. Or just the opposite, they think they never want to do something, and we take them somewhere and they really love it and they excel there. So we just started our partnership with the Carson Senior Center, and we're helping them with their serving and cleaning up, and we're hoping to get into the thrift store and also to the gift shop. And we've had an orientation at Walmart. We've set up appointments at the Starbucks plant, the Humane Society, Carson Tahoe Hospital, and Eagle Valley Children's Home. And Thursday, we're going to be meeting with this, I believe it's called Simerson Construction Company. Simerson. And they've expressed an interest in having a couple of our kids go there, doing the jobs that they're having trouble hiring for. So they want the kids to put the tools away and keep the shop clean and work on the vehicles. So I think it's going to be a real good fit for some of our kids. Young adults, I'm sorry. I got to start doing that. I've told them I'd quit calling them kids. But this has just been such an amazing opportunity, and I just want to thank Jan and Christy. They have been absolutely just so supportive in helping getting this going. Carson City School District, thank you. We really appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to thank Voc Rehab for giving us Grace, because Grace has taught me so much so quickly. And just thanking all our partnerships that we've made in the community so far. So, thank you. And if anybody has any contacts or any ideas or anything you'd like, I have cards and I'd love to, because we're always looking to expand. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Trustee Walker.
I just wanted to say, Karen, you do amazing work with these students, and you're a great advocate, and I'm always inspired when I hear you speak, and you change lives, and so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, just a comment. This is what you just described. I mean, this is a wonderful program. Are you tracking all of your successes? And I say this only because to keep building on this is something that's special. So are you tracking?
As soon as we have a few. No, really, right now what we've been doing, because we are so new, we have been going to the work sites. It is a data-driven program. I take data, Carolyn's taking data, Grace has her data that she does for her Voc Rehab. And yes, that's our goal, is to employ these kids and make sure they stay employed. So.
Thank you very much. Oh, just Mr. Stokes.
If I could ask one question, what's one of the bigger hurdles that you have when you approach a potential partner and you explain your program? Are there things that you've run into that have been barriers?
I'm going to let Grace, who is our job coach. Grace has been going out mostly and contacting it. I will answer for a second, but what I have seen, and when I was working in the high school trying to do the same thing, a lot of times it was the insurance piece. And that's where you'd have that sounds great, let me go talk to corporate. And then corporate would say, no way are we having these kids in. But because now we have that policy, that blanket policy, thank you. People are much more willing to let us in. And our numbers are low right now, only because, I'm going to say it, we only have one van, and I can only fit 7 kids and 1 driver in the van. And so, but it's a small number, which I think is a really good way to start, because the kids are always, the young adults are always supervised. We're splitting up. We drop some off with Grace at Computer Corps. I go to Goodwill. Carolyn goes to the senior center. So it's worked well, saying that they know, all these partnerships understand that they will be supervised at all times, never left alone, and they're getting some great free labor. So, but it is the van part that's hard, holding us back.
So just to add to that, do you have enough students to employ a bus as opposed to a van or multiple vans?
Right now, I have 7, and I have a waiting list of a few more students. I don't know what the number is where you get a bus. We just want one of those longer vans. I have a lot to ask for.
12 passenger.
Or 2 vans, yeah, or 2 vans, because really, we are spending a lot of our time. I'll drop here, trying to figure it out. I'll drop you here, you need to have these kids here by 9:30, and then I'm gonna run over. Carolyn and I drive the students. We have our driver thing. Grace doesn't drive the students because she's a contractor, but, and it's a lot of running around, so we dump some kids here, and then I run over here and make sure, oh, we gotta get this one over to Fritch, and Carolyn has to go, so we have to take all the kids. So, that's a barrier. You're welcome. Thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you for drawing that question out too, Mr. Stokes, because that's good to know another way that we can support, because you're obviously doing good work and giving these students and young adults the opportunities that we'd like all of our students to have, and particularly for them to ease that transition time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Okay, do we have any further questions or any public comment on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to agenda item 8, discussion and possible action to approve the Carson City School District Communication Plan for possible action. Dan Davis.
Good evening, trustees. Thanks for having me tonight. I am excited to present to you the, hopefully, final draft of the communications plan for the school district. I wanted to note, and it's noted in your packets, that I had some edits made to page 6 of the document, mainly the inclusion of the overall communication goal, and there was a few additional edits that I made to that page. Before I begin, I wanted to just kind of call to your attention again that this document is a living, breathing communications plan. So as we progress throughout the year and see a need for changes or edits to that document, I'm not going to be the one to see it all the way through and say, no, we got to stick to this plan. If something's not working, I want to make some changes so we're not missing out on any additional opportunities or things of that nature. So just know that going in, that these are strategies that can be modified based on recommendations that the board provides or as we see fit at the district office. And it's a brand new thing for the district, so there are going to be some stones in the road that we'll have to navigate through, and ideally we'll be able to fine-tune this and get things rolling for 2018, 2019. So also note too that the plan is linked closely with the strategic plan. A lot of the objectives, strategies, tactics are tied directly to that overreaching strategic plan, and that's by design. I've tried to tie them as closely with that so we're not pulling resources in additional directions. So that's kind of the strategy behind that. I guess I'll just go ahead and dive in. I know really kind of the main focus that I want to have for you this evening is page 6, where we begin the objectives. And I know it was noted in the previous meeting that I presented that these are some lofty objectives. I am aware of how challenging this will be. I would rather focus on bringing about the greatest amount of information and good and image to the district that I can. And these are in line. I think they're doable. They are lofty, but we may do some further assessment at the end of this year and, I should say, the start of the 2018-2019 school year. So at the completion of this plan. So that being said, filling all available positions within the district is a pretty lofty goal. I think it's doable. We are in the process of organizing a job/career fair for the district to happen December 5th. There'll be some further communication coming out on that, but it's a goal that I've worked with Human Resources and Dr. Delphin to achieve. That is part of our efforts is bringing in the necessary employees to the district. Additionally, on Objective 1, I've initiated the first quarterly newsletter that went out the end of September. The second issue will be distributed in December. That is a quarterly communications piece that we are utilizing through a program called Constant Contact. It's a listserv online tool that we have that serves close to 16,000 individuals, including students, employees, parents, community partners throughout Carson City. So if you look at the population of the city and the reach that we have with that one tool, we're making tremendous headway in that regard of disseminating information to our greatest extent. Other points to note on Objective 1, I'm working on coordinating a promotional video for the district that would be utilized for human resources purposes in bringing about additional staff. And just kind of rolling through, Objective 2, Item A, distribute more than 100 news releases annually. So that averages out to be about roughly 2 news releases a week. We've been right on target with that. Again, there's not been a lack of good news to share. I've sort of been inundated somewhat now in my position by principals, teachers, with all the great things that we can share. So it's just taking a more strategic approach to which ones we want to really address and give coverage to. But that's an overreaching goal that I have is hitting that mark. And I think anything more than 2 to 3 releases a week is going to inundate our local news outlets and possibly allow them to pay less attention to the more significant stories that we want them to cover. So with that, and this is a tool that I have not yet activated, but I want to track public relations, communications, marketing. It's a very difficult field to really measure. And so there's a tool that I will be applying. It's an earned media equivalency. And so basically what that is you tally up the column inches or total time on a broadcast station, what the advertising value would be for that. And because it's gone through a third party, it's not direct advertising, it increases the value because it's more newsworthy. And so you multiply that by 3. And so I will be tracking all of the news as it appears in print, broadcast, and multiplying that out. And so I should have a running tally of basically our success as managing that communications vehicle via news media. So that's one way to kind of measure effectiveness in public relations and communication. So similarly, you can also track the total number of positive news stories versus negative, and that's part of image and branding. And my goal here is, of course, to average greater than 90% positive in that regard. So, of course, we know that there are issues and things that arise that may set a negative tone on the district. It's my effort to help negate that and keep things more on a positive reach as far as the community and on our image and our brand. let's see, continuing on page 7, and I know this is a little bit different because I gave you an updated page 6. Our website, I don't have a benchmark per se as the total average daily views, but I want to establish a benchmark by the end of this year as we begin setting tracking mechanisms with that. But I'd like to average more than 1,000 daily views. That's a decent goal. Additionally, with social media, and if you're not following us on Facebook or Twitter, I'd encourage you to go out and follow the district, follow the individual schools. Each school has a separate Facebook account. Some of them may have Twitter, but if you're not already following us on Facebook, go click the like button. So I would like to increase that by July 1st by 400 new followers. So that's a pretty lofty goal, but I think it's something that we can do, especially with regular and specific content to that page that is of interest to our followers. So
Do you have any thoughts about branching out into Instagram? Just because I know that's something the younger kids are
following. We do have an Instagram
following.
account. My reason, it's more of a picture-focused platform, and I certainly can do that a little bit more. It's just difficult because I'm managing about 12 or 13 separate pages for Facebook, and so as I kind of get that under control and I train a few more of the site Facebook managers, like some of the office managers and principals, administrators at the different schools will be able to manage their sites more regularly. Then I can add in some new platforms. Instagram would be a good platform for the district. I don't know if I would say per school site, just because it's difficult enough to find people to manage those accounts regularly. And again, to point out, if these accounts aren't managed regularly, daily, at least weekly, they lose their effectiveness tremendously. So if you're not actively posting and doing stuff, the algorithms for social media, for Facebook, for Instagram, decrease significantly if there's not regular posting. So that's part of my effort is managing those and managing my time. I mean, you could literally spend more than 6 hours a day managing Facebook and Instagram and all those different accounts. But it is a consideration that I have thought about and will continue to pursue as we get things under control. Finally, my last objective, and this, of course, is something that I need to dedicate a little bit more time and effort to, but community partnerships. I know we've got a strong community, as evidenced by recent events, that really have ownership with the district. They have, find value in what we're doing, and I think that there's opportunity for us to even activate further relationships with them in terms of sponsorship, in terms of partnership, and a number of other things. So that goal of adding or establishing at least 3 new partners, community partners, is a realistic goal that I'd like to pursue.
Just on that, have you, okay, when you say, like establishing 3 new partnerships, now I'm going to go back to a CTE meeting I went to here 3 weeks ago. Within the CTE program, they now have 179 partners, and they ask for, at that meeting, for their business partners to put down other business. I think what I'm trying to say is we've got now maybe close to 200, and do you work with them in just promoting how much our community is coming forward?
Our CTE program, that's a good question, thanks. Our CTE program is currently being managed, the marketing communications being managed by an sourced party. In plain sight media is managing all their communications. That is something that is under consideration for 2018, 2019. So I am not privy to a lot of the information that goes on at those meetings. I can certainly consider that in the future in attending those and managing that relationships more strongly.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I know in plain sight, Renee, she's doing a good job there. That's one piece of marketing, but you have the communications plan for the district, and part of that is in the community and full partnership. A lot of it is taking place there, and we have a long ways to go. We'll talk about that tomorrow night at our community PLC. Yeah. But I think what you're doing is just tremendous. I just follow everything that you put out, and I think you are creating that positive image, and that this community in full partnership is crucial. And I think that needs to be, but just to talk to them and say, hey, we're all one district.
Yeah. So, well, and it certainly brings up a few other. I wouldn't call them issues, but as in terms of timing and when CTE is releasing information, there was one occurrence where I sent out a press release one morning, then CTE sent out a press release that same morning, and again, it loses its effectiveness if we are stacking press releases or news announcements simultaneously, and so the media outlets are like, okay, which story are we going to go with? Or sometimes they don't have space enough to include both. And so and we are in the process of working, and I'm working more closely with CTE and In Plain Sight Media to target the delivery system of when those are calendared and when they're being distributed. So those are the objectives. Those are the measurable components of this plan. So at the conclusion of this school year, so July 1st, I should have some measurable data associated with these objectives. So these are, terms are goals, objectives, strategies, tactics, they're very similar, so I don't want to try and confuse you in that regard, because I know the strategic plan also uses similar terminology and whatnot. So hopefully you're able to understand that this is, our overall goal, these are our objectives, and really the implementation plan that begins on page 11 is those goals, strategies, and tactics are how I will be measuring the effectiveness of the objectives. So that is kind of the way to define it. So if we can turn to page 11. So this is kind of this is how everything's going to roll out and it has been, and this has been ongoing since I began, and I began implementing a lot of new things, and there's ongoing communication that is already happening, and I listed that out in here. So, but if these are not happening, they will be happening at least by July 1st, 2018. So, I don't need to take all the time to go through all of these goals and strategies and tactics, but know that these are separate. They're not necessarily going to be measured as well as the objectives will be during the evaluation portion of the plan in July, but these will or should be all in effect by July 1st. So I know that I spoke with some of the trustees prior to the meeting. I know that there are some minor edits, some things that we need to tweak in terms of wording and whatnot. So if you have those documents, I can certainly take those back and make those edits, but I would like to push for an approval for the communications plan. Are there questions related to this, or are there additional follow-up that needs to be addressed?
Well, just to add it in the record, so one of the comments that we had talked about was in the plan, and what section was that? I'd have to...
I think it's the page 3.
In the communications mission, It kind of talks about the school board as, makes it sound separate from what's going on in the school. So we talked about revising that so it's inclusive language, because we're one team, basically.
Yeah. Noted. I love it. So thank you.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the CCSD communication plan.
Motion by trustee Walker and seconded by trustee Green. Before we begin, I was going to mention that Dan Davis is my brother, and if our attorney recommends that I abstain from voting on this, is this something I should abstain from? Because it's the district-wide, it doesn't really benefit him. I'm not sure on that, so I'll seek your counsel.
If you have no economic interest in the outcome, I think your disclosure is fine.
I don't have any economic interest in the outcome. Okay, so I did disclose that.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions? Any comments? Any public comment? I did find a couple errors, so I'll get them to you afterwards. And we'll go ahead. Okay, all in favor? Aye. And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Great job.
Go ahead and go on to agenda item 9, presentation on the management of the district's volunteer program for discussion only. Ann Sear and Dr. Jose Delfin.
Good evening, trustees.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to say how much work Ann has put into this project and program, and she's done a lot of research, and I'm just here to answer questions. So Ann, take it away.
Thank you. So this evening, I'm just going to present you with some information. As Dr. Delfin mentioned, we've been doing some research. This has been ongoing. Roughly 18 months ago, we made one change within the Human Resources Department. We outsourced fingerprinting of all prospective employees as well as volunteers. And that was kind of when all of the work began. We started looking at how efficient it was to be fingerprinting at the district office, what costs were involved, etc. And at that time, the Department of Public Safety had informed us that our hardware and our software was all old and outdated and had to be updated. So we were also looking at, was it more cost effective to outsource this or purchase all new systems in order to continue doing the fingerprinting in-house? So it was at that time that we outsourced fingerprinting and began using Fingerprinting Express on Highway 50, and it has worked tremendously well. Our folks within the Human Resources Department that used to spend hours and hours and hours rolling fingerprints and taking care of that data management and all of those records within the office, all of that has been streamlined, and allowing that vendor to handle that process for us also just frees up our time at the district office. We don't have roughly 1,200 people a year coming into the district office to be fingerprinted. So I'm just going to kind of begin here with an overview. So within our district, it goes without saying that our volunteers are essential to the principals, the teachers, schools, families, and the larger school community. Public schools are more frequently being required to do more with less, and our volunteers are critical to supporting our students. So within our school district, we find volunteers working in the schools, in the main offices, within classrooms, helping us with field trips, athletics, and extracurricular activities, just to name a few. Volunteers are directly tied into the mission of the school district. Our mission statement, which is prominently displayed on our website, reads that in partnership with the community, we will make the most of every day for every student by empowering them with the skills, knowledge, values, and opportunities to thrive. And of course, our volunteers are directly attached to that mission. So it would make sense that we would have some more formalized programs associated with helping them make that successful. Volunteers, what are we looking for in these people? I mean, ideally, they should be friendly and caring, reliable and flexible people. They need to have an understanding and be appreciative of the work of the school staff and the volunteer program overall. They need to bring a professional attitude and an ability to work cooperatively with school staff. They need to have an interest in working with young people. They need to be of good moral character. They need to have the time and willingness to serve. And they need to have an understanding of the important role that education plays in the lives of the children and our community. So this is just kind of an overview of what the fabric of our school district looks like. And you'll see that the light blue area represents our employees, so roughly 900, approaching 900. And then volunteers, last year we background checked 317 people that were interested in fulfilling volunteer positions. We also have community partners. Those folks are not volunteers. They are receiving some form of compensation, whether it be a stipend or they may have a paid position through the city where they're performing some work for the school district. And then, of course, we have a variety of independent contractors who are also people who are compensated through grant programs or what have you, and they work in our student support services, they work in professional development, they support a number of programs within the school district, but they are neither volunteers nor employees. So a volunteer, just to be clear, is an unsalaried person who is authorized by the school board to perform volunteer services for the district. A volunteer serves in such capacity without compensation or employee benefits of any type, except for workers' compensation as provided for under our self-insurance program. All volunteers serve at the discretion of the superintendent without any expressed or implied privileges and may be released from volunteering if so deemed by the superintendent or a designee. So our current process for screening and bringing these folks on board begins with approval from the school. So usually the school principal or the department head, for instance, the athletics director, whomever is at that site that has a volunteer position that they need to fill, they approve that person to apply for that position. The person then comes to the district office and they are given a volunteer packet. And this is a fairly paper-intensive process for them. They complete the packet, the volunteer application, and a variety of consents and waivers and so forth to allow us to do the background check on them, acknowledgement forms and so forth. And then we send them over to Fingerprinting Express. And at Fingerprinting Express, they begin that background process, which it should be noted is not an inexpensive process. The volunteer bears $10 of the cost, but the total cost is $53 per volunteer. So if we were to look at just last year with 317 people coming through, potential volunteers that were background checking, that's roughly $13,600 that we spent last year fingerprinting and background checking potential volunteers. So those records then come back to the Human Resources Department and they look at all of the information in the application as well as the background check results. General guidelines, we do not allow anyone with a felony to volunteer within the school district. And if they have misdemeanors on their criminal record, we would prefer that those be at least 7 years old. Okay, but those are kind of general guidelines. We don't have any set written regulation on those requirements. So the volunteer is then either approved or declined, and they then report to the school and begin their assignment. So that's our current process. And as I mentioned, there isn't any formal written guidelines for staff that kind of would direct them on the decision-making points along the way here. We have people within the Human Resources Department that have been doing this for a very long time, and it's just kind of second nature to them. But I think as we look, going forward, new people coming into the Human Resources Department, as well as new site administrators, new principals, new vice principals, new department heads who don't have that institutional knowledge, that historical knowledge to understand what that process looks like and what the guidelines are. Okay, so if we consider what might be missing from that process and we look at current best practices in volunteer management, just kind of based on some of the research that I've done over the past year, recommendations from the Nevada Public Agency Insurance Pool. They provide a lot of written guidance on managing volunteers, whether that's programs at a city or a county or a nonprofit or a school district. They're all pretty consistent recommendations. Beyond screening, we would have some written formalized processes for orienting and training these volunteers. Not a heavy amount of training, but we definitely want to consider our policies on unlawful harassment, workplace violence, drug and alcohol use in the school district, our applicable safety policies and procedures, how we use vehicles, equipment, our phone and computer use policies, student records privacy, FERPA, that type of thing. They should really be given some just very basic high view information on what those policies are. And then supervision, every volunteer should be assigned someone to supervise them. And we assume that that's a site administrator at some level or their designee, but to have that noted somewhere formally within their onboarding process, that this is the person who will be supervising you. And if you have any questions or concerns, that is the person that you would go to express those. Another best practice in volunteer management includes some type of recognition program. And to give that some formality, you may want to consider, something that you could put a story in your local newspaper or recognize these folks on district websites. Perhaps some type of recognition dinner, or just, a gift card, a movie card or something like that to say thank you for all of the time that these people lend to the district. And then lastly, just some policies and procedures in place to address separation and or termination of a volunteer if it's not working out, or if they're finished, they're ready to retire from their volunteer position. So those would be some of the things that we would like to see more formalized within a volunteer management program. So this all kind of ties in with Senate Bill 287, which was made effective July this year. And if you read that bill and the introduction to the bill text, it strikes you that it's all about mandatory reporting and who is a mandatory reporter and how often we have to train these folks on mandatory reporting and all of that good stuff. But there is a little bit of language at the very end of the bill text that talks about various other provisions in the bill that apply to the safety of children, and those provisions are about volunteers. So within the state law, we now have requirements for conducting FBI background checks on volunteers. And those background checks are required on volunteers who are likely to have unsupervised or regular contact with pupils. Those are the folks who need to have the full FBI fingerprint background check, okay?
So has the Department of Ed come up with what exactly that definition is? How many hours they're in the school or something?
They are still conducting board workshops on that, yeah. But I think the plain language, one who would have unsupervised or regular contact with pupils would be the type of volunteer who's embedded in a program. So that might be like an assistant coach. That might be somebody who is working in a classroom on a regular basis, not somebody who's coming in to, read a couple times a year or perhaps help out with a field trip. Again, if you have an overnight chaperone, that's somebody who's going to be unsupervised with a student. So what you see in other school districts is they'll apply like a tiered approach, where they'll say this is a level 1, a level 2, a level 3 volunteer. And that's something that we could certainly consider doing with the various volunteer positions that we have. But the language in the new NRS reads unsupervised or regular contact.
I just was going to say, I think our practice, at least with the sites that I've been at, is that if you're going to be in the classroom or you're going to attend field trips, our practice has been to ask you to be fingerprinted and pay for the background check.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing a little bit more than the NRS is requiring, which...
You are absolutely correct, and I'll actually cover that in a few more slides, because our practice actually exceeds the requirement of this law. So there's nothing being introduced here that's going to require us to do anything differently. Yeah. So the change in state law requires the FBI fingerprint background checked on those having unsupervised or regular contact, and they're also requiring that be done every 5 years. Another change that's been introduced under this bill is that the volunteer must provide written authorization for the school district to obtain any information concerning that volunteer, that potential volunteer, that might be available from the statewide registry. This is the Department of Public Safety's criminal registry. And any equivalent registry maintained by a governmental entity in a jurisdiction in which that volunteer has resided within the immediately preceding 5 years. So the reason I've underlined that and I kind of highlight that is it doesn't really put any new requirement on us, but it does open the door for us to ask for a little more information that we're not currently asking for. If we were to request resident information going back 5 years, we would also have knowledge that we may be able to request information from another state's criminal records repository. So that's just an interesting thing to consider. But again, doesn't introduce any new requirements for us. Another change within this bill is in conducting the investigation into the background of a volunteer. The school district may cooperate with any appropriate law enforcement agency to obtain information relating to the criminal history of the volunteer, including, without limitation, any record of warrants for arrest or of applications for protective orders against the volunteer. So again, much like the previous slide, this isn't requiring us to do anything different, but opens the door for us to work with law enforcement agencies to obtain more information that might be taken into consideration and may not appear on a criminal record, but may be in court records somewhere. Okay, and then this is another similar introduction. We may also use a substantiated report of child abuse or neglect in making determinations concerning accepting or terminating a volunteer, and in taking any sort of action in trespassing them from district property or requesting restraining orders. And that's not something that we currently do or have any sort of formalized process or guidance in place to kind of direct that. But again, it's language that's been introduced that provides options for us, but nothing mandatory that would really guide any change in our existing practice. Yes.
So if I can add, Jose Delfin, for the record, that let's say a volunteer does not make the cut in our district, it doesn't mean that that volunteer, let's say as a parent, cannot attend their school or their student's function. They perfectly can. So they can attend as a parent, go to all the festivities, any events, any extracurriculars. But as far as volunteering, that's a different level of scrutiny. So it's not the end for any of our guardians or our parents in the district that may want to still put forth the effort in their own way.
Thank you, Dr. Delphin. Okay, so that kind of sums up the changes that were introduced in SB 287 as they pertain to volunteers. There's a lot more within that bill that pertain to mandatory reporting, as I mentioned earlier. But if we look at the requirements in the bill and what our district practices currently in place are, we fingerprint unsupervised volunteers every 5 years. Our practice is to fingerprint all volunteers, regardless of whether they're supervised or unsupervised, have regular, irregular contact, and we do those background checks every 3 years. A new requirement in the bill is that a volunteer may not begin their service until the background check is complete. And we do, albeit infrequently, when we have time constraints regarding field trips or something like that, and we don't have a background check back, and somebody really wants to participate, we do make exceptions and allow them to go with the understanding that if something comes back on that background check, their status as a volunteer may be revoked. Unfortunately, with this change in the law, we will no longer be able to continue with that practice. We will have to insist that their background check be completed before they're allowed to begin any volunteer service. Yes, Trustee Walker.
And that was one of the questions I had is, what is the time frame usually for this turnaround? And then at the same time, I just know from when I worked at Fritch, there was a large number of parents. So who's telling the parents, oh, you're at the end of your third year, so you need to get this process going in the spring so there's no lapse?
Right. I'm not really sure how we manage that process of notifying people that their 3 years is coming up. I know that, yes. Does Jolie handle that? Or?
Right, so our staff handles that. So we do have a volunteer database, if you will, so we know who needs to re-up. And my staff calls them and lets them know, hey, we need you to come in. Right.
And do you also notify the school? Because I don't recall as an administrator ever having a list of who needed to do it. And so.
Right, we try not to trouble the administration. And we like to keep it seamless, so if they're continuing to volunteer, we just keep them moving. Also, I just wanted to add to what Ann just said regarding field trips. We do have allowed folks that may have had some criminal records to attend field trips, not as a volunteer, but they can go ahead to the field trip and be there with their child, but not actually supervise kids in that process. So they can still, again, participate and put forth the effort to be there with their kid for those events and to have those memories. But, as a volunteer, we have to draw the line somewhere.
Well, and those volunteers in those instances would not be unsupervised. There would be a teacher supervising them and keeping track of that, so it wouldn't fall within the law there.
The only exceptions have been if they're really on the pedophile registry, then we don't allow them at all anywhere near them. Yep.
Yeah, and it seems that exception is most frequently made for athletics programs. We'll have a volunteer coach that's starting, but we're still waiting on the background check. So, yes.
So, and I was just going to say, in light of the law, we probably are going to want to make sure administrators are notified so that we make sure there's not any issues at any of these campuses.
Right, right. Okay, so I think that pretty much ties up all of the changes. So what we are working on currently and will be introducing to you at your next board meeting is a policy and regulation on volunteer management. And the wording has been drafted for inclusion under the section on community. And we have also been putting together a volunteer handbook, which will be available to the volunteers. All of these processes, we're really looking at the whole, soup to nuts. How can we automate this, put it all on a district website, a page dedicated to volunteers where they would find the volunteer application, any online training that we'd like for them to look at, download the handbook, and have all of that information readily available to them there on a web page just for the volunteers. So I'm thinking that's going to help you, Dan, with your goals, because 400 new, I have 317 volunteers that'll be clicking on that page. So we'll be helping you with that goal.
And I think the parent-teacher organizations that exist would, because I think there's been some confusion on where do we send them for fingerprinting,
Right.
What do you do, and having that, and even if you have got the website with all the information, if there's any training that you provide, if it's a video,
Right.
it's something that they can click on and watch at home, that would be a super place to direct them.
I've seen that with several other school districts where they have like a little video on mandatory reporting and a little video on FERPA, and the potential volunteer just signs a statement that they, acknowledge they have viewed that training material. So, any other questions or recommendations, things you would like to see in this prospective policy or reg that we'll be introducing?
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
When does it actually take place? When did the law go into? Was it this year?
It was effective July of this year.
So we're doing this now?
Correct.
Okay. And all the volunteers that hadn't been fingerprinted and all that know that? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 10, informational update on the sunsetting of the Nevada High School Proficiency Exams, HSPE, including details on the protocol for receiving a retroactive standard high school diploma or adult standard diploma. For discussion only, Susan Kima.
Susan Kima for the record. During the 2013 legislative session, the state moved or transferred away from the high school proficiency exam. In 2017, AB 7 removed the requirement to pass the end of course exam in order to receive a standard high school diploma. The combination of those two legislative changes now have paved the way for current and former students who were not previously eligible for a diploma because they did not pass the HSPE to now receive a diploma as long as they have met the credit requirements for their cohort. This affects former Carson High School students, former Pioneer students. It affects current and former adult ed students, as well as the students that we have in our correctional facilities. To be considered for a standard high school diploma or an adult diploma, adult standard diploma, an individual must contact the school that they were last enrolled in, and they also must make a request to have a transcript review. So we've put this information on our website. We have a form in Spanish and in English at each of the sites available in case people don't want to look for scratch sheets of paper. We can just have them fill that form out. They can put in a request for a transcript review, and if they meet the credit requirement, upon analysis, we'll issue them a diploma.
Do you have any questions?
Just one. On the procedure one, their diplomas will state that October 13th, 2017 is their graduation date.
And the reason being is that that's the date that the state issued the guidance memo that these changes are now in effect. So then as a district team, we looked at, okay, so do we need to go back and figure out what day graduation was in 1982? Do we need to figure out what day graduation was in 1991? This way we did it effective the date that the state notified us. that this change can be made.
So do we have something that'll explain that to employers when they ask for people's diplomas? Would this be one of the things that they give when they're going to get a job?
The fact that they are now have a high school diploma and what day. Yes, we talked about that, but they haven't had those diplomas all this time. Now they do have a diploma.
Just for curiosity's sake, is there a time limit on this, or is this just open-ended? So these people could apply, former students could apply this year or 5 years from now. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. At this, there wasn't any specific guidance from the State Department on that. So at this point, the answer to your question is yes. They can apply today, they can apply a year from now, and we would conduct a transcript review. And if they met the credit requirements, then we will issue them a diploma.
Okay, do we have any other questions? I'm just going to comment that I think it's funny that our State Department of Education misspelled guidance in the name of the document, guidance memorandum, but that would just be me. Okay, do we have any public comment on this? Either. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan.
Madam President?
Yes.
I'd like to request a 5-minute recess so that I could set up my computer for this next agenda item.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute recess and we'll resume once Stacy's set up. Thanks. ready, so we will resume the meeting with agenda item 11, discussion and possible action on the process for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2017 calendar year for possible action. Laurel Crossman and Stacy Wilkie McCullough.
Thank you. So I'm not changing the actual superintendent evaluation form. What we're kind of looking at is changing the process of the evaluation when we do it. So the form that I've handed out would be the compiling one. The first form we okayed at the April meeting, which is the one that had all the designations for what leadership is and the ratings. And this is what every individual would fill out. So instead of us bringing these forms to the meeting that we're actually doing the evaluation, what I'd like to do, and I met with Mr. Walker and Mr. Stokes and Mr. Pavlakis, because when we had a NASB meeting later in April, we found out that us in Lyon County are the only ones that actually use that process, where we bring the actual evaluation forms to the meeting and we go over it one by one by one by one by one. And if you've sat through that, which we all have except Dawn, lucky guy, sometimes it's a lot of time consuming, it's a little duplication, and sometimes it's more back and forth than it needs to be. So what I was trying to think of working with this group was trying to simplify it. So what I'm proposing is we all do our individual sheets a week before or longer, because we're starting a little early, which is nice. But before the December meeting, you would get your forms to Renee and to Laurel. And they would get together and they would compile the results so that we're not standing around for 10 minutes adding and subtracting and we know that they're right, because in that hurriness, sometimes there's errors. So on that day, this is what the form would look like. And the printed one that I printed out, it got all jumbled. So that's why I'm thanking Miss Renee and Susan for helping me out here, because this is what it would look like. You would get the bullet that we're using in the evaluation. You would get comments. So when you put in your forms, you'll have a chance to put your comments down, and all the printed comments will be compiled in that area. And then what I'm suggesting is a box that goes with superior, very superior ratings, which would have, there's one trustee that voted superior, 2 trustees that did very satisfactory, 3 that did satisfactory, and 1 that did unsatisfactory, which if you add that up, ends up being a satisfactory rating for that characteristic. Now, if you want, we can do names. If you'd rather, for more openness, you could put the names of the trustees with your rating if you want, or we can keep it just numbers. That's up for discussion. And then at the end, if you go to page 4, Sue, the only other change in this form would be adding this last box, after the last box, go up a little bit more, thank you, is the overall rating. Because right now we really don't have, it ends up in that box, but we don't really have a section where it says his overall rating is satisfactory, these were the total points that he got, and then right underneath it is the signatures of the president and the superintendent. If we do it this way, that doesn't mean that so when we get to the December meeting, this is the form you'll have. It'll be in your packet because everybody will get it to Renee and Laurel in a fashion, and if you don't, Renee will track you down. And if we'll put a deadline, and not this year, but maybe next year, we can make that deadline set. So if you don't have it in by December 5th, you don't get to have your evaluation count, your scores account. You can still make comments during the meeting, but it won't actually count in the evaluation. But I think for this one, I think we're just working it out. So I think if we put a date and Renee and Laurel follow up with you, I think we can still get the process done in a timely manner. So then at the meeting, Laurel will go over each topic and the comments, and give the rating. And at that time, if there's any other comments that any of the trustees would like to make, they can make them then.
So, just to kind of follow up on what you said, so you said at the December meeting we'll get these, but we would have these submitted before the December meeting this year, so we'd get them in our next meeting in the 28th, right?
No, you'll have the evaluation, your individual evaluation. But in December, at the December meeting, you'll have this compilation form.
Right.
Not the actual evaluation. You'll get the evaluation form. Well, you have it, but we'll go. Yes.
So each trustee received one of these forms this evening. What is proposed is that on or before Monday, December 4th, you need to turn these in to either Renee or Mrs. Crossman. On December 4th or 5th, somewhere in that area, Mrs. Crossman and Renee will get together and they will prepare the actual compilation that is up on the screen. In your board packet for the meeting of December 12th, there will be a copy of that compilation. And if your scores were not received by Monday the 4th, then obviously there won't be time for them to be included in that compilation. All the trustees will then, and the public, will receive a copy of the final score sheet. Renee will have with her at the meeting on December 12th all of the individual evaluations, so that if any member of the public or any of the trustees want to see them, they'll be available, because the law requires that this be a public process. And then the board president will present the evaluation, ask for any additional comments and any public comment, and then there could be a motion to approve the overall rating as set forth in the evaluation.
Just a question, because I know, Joe, you've been tallying them as we've done this in the past when we've done it. How in the past did we determine, we'd keep track of what everyone voted? How did we add everything up? Did we just pick one number for each area based on each person for that? Or
we just tallied each rating category per box, and then, we just...
Or did we tally everyone's individually, and then...
Tally it, and then superior is 4 points. Yeah. Very satisfactory is 3 points.
I get
and then you divide it by 7.
Oh,
so if you add the numbers that I had on that first page, it's 1, 2, 3, so that's 6, 7. Yeah, it ends up being, so it would be 1 times 4, 2 times 3, 3 times 2, and 1 times 1, and then you take that and divide it by 7, and then you come up with what it is. And if you look
That's
on,
math.
Yeah, and on page 4 is where we have what the, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Habakis. Okay. But I was thinking, we set that December 4th deadline because we didn't think we'd be able to introduce it at this meeting, because we weren't sure that this was an action item. So I'd kind of like to move it up to that Friday for December 1st. So if you guys aren't getting them in, that gives Renee a little bit. But it gives you almost 2 weeks to get it in. So I don't think it should be a problem. And then that gives you a couple more days. And then you and Laurel can get together on Monday, and so that we can get those out for the open meeting law posting of the agenda. So I'll welcome any questions, comments, other suggestions.
I'll just say thank you for your leadership on that, because at that meeting, we both were saying, well, this would really clean up the process, and then you actually took the leadership role, so thank you.
You're welcome. I wish you could have been at that meeting, because we had this roundtable of the directors from 17 counties and the executive boards, and everybody's asking how they do superintendent evaluations, and we started telling ours, and people are like, you do what? Because it's just, nobody's ever done it as transparent as we have, but I still think that we keep our transparency, and our availability to let Mr. Stokes know too, and that's another thing, if we have him in early, that gives Mr. Stokes a chance to talk to Laurel if there's something on there that he might need more data for, because when we ask questions here, he'll go, well, I have data, that's wrong. You're thinking that I haven't done this leadership, but I have this data to back it up. So it makes it a little even more fair, because he's not blindsided, we're not blindsided. We can kind of see what's going on, so we can ask questions and ask the right ones and have answers at the meeting, so that we're not this, well, I'll get back to you next meeting. Well, next meeting, we have other stuff and we're already doing the evaluation. So I think that this makes it a lot fair, more transparent, but still keeps it where everybody in the public has a say too if they want to.
Are there any other, Trustee Swarzak?
No, I just.
Well, you were touching the button, so I was.
So do we, for transparency, do we need to, we're going to be casting our votes basically in private and submitting them. Does the public need, I don't care either way, but do we need to say, do they need to somehow know this is Trustee Casiopo's evaluation, this is Trustee Green's? How does that work?
I would recommend that you put your name on maybe the first page when you turn them in, and then.
And that's fine. I just didn't know if we had to present it that way so that it's all.
That'll be important for the comments as well, so
Right.
that when the comments are printed, Renee will know who made what comment.
And if you want to, that's why we have the box with the trustees. If you'd rather, instead of saying one, you could have, Joe there. 2 was Laurel and Ron. It's up to you guys. If you feel that that's more transparent, that's fine with me too.
I don't have a preference one way or another. I just wanted to make sure we don't do something that after the fact, somebody can come back and say, well, wait a minute, I don't know. The public doesn't come back and say, I don't know how Trustee Casiopo voted.
Okay, then just put our names down.
Yeah, so we'll make that change and we'll put names as there. So then you'll know that it's Joe and Dawn, that's 2. So it'll be 2 times 4 because they're superiors. And then.
Did you get what you?
Because those will, I'm not a graphic designer, but
So now you're introducing spelling.
That's where I'm good. I think Renee was needing a little explanation on where to put the names.
Yeah, where you have trustee 1. Where I have trustee, I'll make it better so that we can make that box so it says superior and then maybe put the trustees behind it. And then all you have to do is put the rating there
It's probably
instead
good
of
to
in
just have
front.
the rating in the box, so it's easier to add.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I brought it all to you guys, because it's only one brain working here, and you know how that works. So.
Comments if we have them.
So
we get this.
I guess probably maybe you're right. There's not a lot of room on this one, and it might get a little.
Just type a piece of paper.
Yeah, we'll just
Yeah.
tap them.
In fact, that would probably be even better if. Let's see.
Put the category header, or, create like a Word doc, put leadership, district, culture, put your rating, and then any comment you might have, and then move on.
Okay.
I don't think they need to have
Mr.
this
Pavlakis
whole
has a
sheet.
suggestion.
If you'd like, Board President, I could write the word comments below each of the categories and leave some space and email those forms to you so that you could actually type them up on your computer if that's easier.
Would you guys like comments at the bottom of each section? A comment.
Email it to Renee, that's easy.
Okay.
I like the email portion,
Yeah.
That'll make sure everybody works on getting it in time.
Well, and I like the comments being directly under it, just because as you're flipping back and forth, it's a little. I was going to say, should we add numbers to each box if we were going to do that? But
So, yes, Mr. Pavlakis, if you can, and if there's not enough room, then you guys can just add them on a separate addendum.
questions or comments or concerns or compliments? I like that from the board meeting a while ago.
Mr. Stokes, a little input from you as to how do you like this process?
I appreciate Trustee Wilkie and bringing this forward. And Trustee Walker, thank you. I think it's a good change.
One of the other reasons why I want to do this is because we're going to have to look for another superintendent in 2020. And so if we can make it a little bit better than it has been, less invasive, I think that will help us in our search too. I think there'll be more people that will want to do that when they're not getting by a firing squad. So I appreciate you guys letting me bring this to the board.
The only thing I'd add, I still think we should, and not to this, just in the evaluation in general, I think we should give some real serious thought to bringing in a 360-degree evaluation form, whether or not that's an outside company that runs it or we figure out how to do it. Because in my opinion, this tells him how we think he's interacting with us, but it doesn't help Mr. Stokes or any future intendant know what their subordinates think, what their peers think of them. It doesn't give them a holistic way of self-improvement, really. And so I think it would be a lot more beneficial to bring in a much more holistic process for them.
Well, and then we discussed that too, Mr. Walker and I, because we think that other districts have surveys from staffs, parents, students, and all of that. But we're so late in the season, we just wanted to get this part done. And then after November, if two trustees want to get together and work on how we should change the evaluation form and what that looks like and adding a survey, I think we're all more than open to that. I just wanted to do something to minimize our next meeting without having to go back and change everything that we did in April.
Well, and what implications would that have on the superintendent's contract? Because I know there's terms in there regarding the evaluation, so I'm not sure. I just would want to make sure that we're in compliance with what we've already contractually agreed to before we take any steps.
And just kind of to follow up with what Stacy was saying, in a lot of the districts, they seem to have an automated process. So the trustees will put their ratings and comments in some kind of a program, and then there's a report that's run. And so then instead of the board president and secretary sitting down and tabulating and cutting and pasting comments, it's just kind of a reviewing that everybody got theirs in and getting the formatting right. And so I think that we just didn't have the time to do it this year, but I think that we all were discussing ways to kind of streamline it and make it a smarter process for everybody involved in the future.
And then we also talked about maybe doing a rubrics for each one, because my view of Superior for his leadership and district cultures built on these things, it might be totally different than what Don thinks. And so we have that variety, and if we had a rubrics to say, well, this is what Superior looks like, this is what very satisfactory, that's something else that I'd like the committee to look, the people working on it look at too, because, I mean, there's a long area there that is all personal background, subjectiveness, yes. So.
Well, and we just added those, even the definitions of superior, very satisfactory, not very long ago.
I know, we're doing well, we're progressing. It's getting to be better process, I think, for both sides.
I do like what Trustee Green said, though. I think this 360 more holistic approach is something we want to start discussing early in the season so that we're wherever we want to be, so that we are there in plenty of time to have this ready and bounce it off Mr. Pavlakis and everybody.
And Mr. Stokes, so he kind of knows
Correct.
what we're looking at. And
Right.
I'm all for that too. But it's got to start like in December so that we're not up against the wall when we get to.
Yeah, no, that's why
That's what we do. So.
Okay.
You ready? Okay.
Sure.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the process as presented for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2017 calendar year.
I'll second.
Motion by Trustee Swerzik, seconded by Trustee Carini. Do we have any further discussion? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion carries. Okay, we'll go ahead on to agenda item 12, approval of consent agenda for possible action.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Motion by trustee Cassiopo, seconded by trustee Wilkie. Any further discussion? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is approved. Agenda item 13, informational items for discussion only. No action will be taken. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the informational items?
We're still doing the PLC meeting tomorrow, correct? Okay.
And just to relay, I had heard a request that some staff were wondering if we would make sure to end by 7 so that they could attend the staff basketball game.
The meeting is scheduled to go until 7:30, but certainly if people feel like they need to leave to support that, we won't lock the doors.
So Dan, you have to make our part go really fast with parent engagement.
Yeah, bring your shoes. And then one thing I just was going to relay for calendaring while we're looking at that, I've had quite a few people say that they really appreciate having the extra day off for Thanksgiving, and some who are even asking for the Monday and Tuesday off too. So just so you know, that's out there. Yeah, they want a late fall break. And then just remind you guys about the tree lighting downtown. Agenda item 14, request for future agenda topics. Do we have any tonight? Okay. Seeing none. Agenda item 15, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned. Hopefully this makes up a little bit for last week. The long one.
Thank you, Sue.